Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to ioRadio with your host, Adam Smith. Today on the show is another in our series where we interface with crypto people, pro-crypto people, and we have a discussion, a debate, a dialogue to find out where they stand and to see if there is any logic or consistency to their pro-crypto arguments. And today on the show, I've got Dr. Rob, a veterinarian who currently lives in New Zealand, who wants to talk about a number of pro-Bitcoin arguments. So let's drop into this and see what he has to say. Our interview ended up being well over an hour, so I've decided to break it into two parts. So the first part, we're going to address one of his main arguments, and in the second part, we're going to address another one of his main arguments. So here we go. Rob, welcome.
Thank you, Adam. I'm happy to be here.
So remind me how we initially touched base and how you ended up being here. My memory is not all that good. I have an idea in my head, but I want to make sure we're on the same page.
Well, basically, I reached out. I think at one point you had said something. I had made a comment, I think, on a YouTube video or something, and you had said if you're interested in coming on, to go to your website and apply. And then I listened to, you had an episode on what was the video called? Dear Elizabeth Warren, I think.
Oh, right, a reaction.
McCormick had put together kind of you did a reaction video to that.
Mm-hmm.
And you had quite a few kind of questions regarding that, and I thought that I could probably clear some of those up potentially, and maybe talk about some other things as well. So I reached out, and you graciously accepted for me to come on.
Okay, that's cool. I've never heard graciously ever been attributed to me, but I'll take it. So do we not have any exchange on Reddit anywhere, or did we?
Nothing specific. No.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I was only on Reddit for a short period of time, maybe 2-3 weeks, something like that. I jumped in and made an account and joined the Reddit Bitcoin community and chatted on there for a few weeks before being blocked.
Okay, so you were sanctioned, and is that because?
Yes, this would have been a month or so ago. Okay. I'm not sure, but no, I was very cordial the whole time I was on there, despite being called many nasty names by a lot of different people. But
well, let's address this because a lot of people go into the Bitcoin subreddit. For those who are not familiar with it, it's probably the largest crypto critical community anywhere on social media. I don't know of any crypto critical social media scene that is larger than that. Our community is pretty passionate about what they believe, and the subreddit has evolved over time. It originally started as more of like just a meme thing for people to make fun of crypto, and it was a lot of crypto people really liked, poking fun at their own hobby. But then it kind of morphed over time as it became one of the few places where people critical of crypto could actually express themselves. And the pro-crypto communities have been so aggressive in eradicating any kind of dissent or criticism or skepticism that Bitcoin, while it originally turned into, was just supposed to be a lighthearted place where people could make fun of stuff, became more or less the center of the universe for people that were skeptical of crypto. And now it's become a lot more serious. There's a lot of pro-crypto people that have been involved in the social media scene for a long time that look at Bitcoin and go, man, this is not what it used to be. You guys have changed it. And that is true, but it's one of the few places where we can have a discussion and be critical and not be instantaneously banned. Now, as a result of that, we've had to develop our own policies to be a bit strict with how much we will let pro-crypto people take over the community, because basically the pro-crypto accounts on Reddit outnumber the skeptics. Like, I think it's 172 to 1. Now I don't know if those are real people, but if you look at our community, we have under 200,000 members, and there's like 6 million on the Bitcoin community. So we have to exert some control, or else we get overwhelmed by people just calling us the same stupid names all the time. So that's probably one reason. If you blow into our community and you hide behind the same talking points, or you just say, I have fun staying poor or something like that, the moderating team, which is all voluntary, and I'm just one of them, they've heard it all before. So sometimes they're a little bit aggressive, and I'm certainly guilty of that as well. So that's kind of just to give you and everybody else a little bit of insight into that. And I'm I'm happy to talk about it. I'm more comfortable talking about it here on a podcast than I am in Bitcoin itself, because it just seems off topic.
Yeah. And I completely understand all of that. And you guys have to kind of run things the way you want to keep the sub kind of portraying the morals and ethics that you stand for, as running that sub. I've got no qualms with that. When I got banned, I sent a message saying, hey, I don't think this was an appropriate ban, and I didn't hear back, and that was the end of it. Not a big deal. And I very much understand. I was there long enough to see you do get a lot of what do you call the people that come from the Bitcoin subreddit?
We call them butters.
I can't think of it.
Bitcoin is
there's another name for the one when they kind of invade. There's
brigaders.
Brigaders, yeah, that was something like that. And I saw a lot of that, and a lot of it is just the kind of useless, have fun, staying poor type talking points, which I don't think I've ever used any of those types of talking points, and I hope that I never do. Kind of the one big talking point that I do use is Bitcoin is hope, because for me that's kind of the case. But
hope. Okay. Well, let's get a little bit of background here. So, you are a pro crypto person, right?
I'm a pro Bitcoin person.
So you fall into that Bitcoin is different camp? Bitcoin is not crypto?
Yes.
See, that's one of our talking points that we kind of, a lot of people believe Bitcoin is different. Bitcoin and all the other cryptocurrencies are in two completely different classifications. We have pretty strong arguments that we think that's kind of not true, but we don't have to touch on that. I want to get a little bit of background. So, how old are you? What's your educational background? What do you do for a living? Give us some background information.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was born and raised in the U.S., kind of a deep red rural area. Went off to college, did both an undergrad degree as well as a postgraduate degree. I'm now a medical doctor.
Oh, really?
I moved overseas. Yes. And I'm in my 40s.
Okay.
I'm in a little bit of a unique situation when it comes to Bitcoin and what you would call some taking on risk.
Right.
And that, I have a good degree. I've got a good secure job now, and even if I lost that, my degree would allow me to pick up another job very quickly, a decent paying job. I don't have kids, don't have plans on having any kids, so no real dependents, anything like that. So I am in a bit of a privileged position when it comes to being able to take on risk.
Yeah, you definitely do not fit the standard demographic of the crypto bro who thinks life is unfair. He can't afford a house. Therefore, let's try some new money and that'll fix everything. You seem to have you're already set up.
Yes, yeah. And so my viewpoint isn't really, poor me, I can't afford stuff. It's my viewpoint is more poor other people who can't afford stuff kind of thing. So I realize that I'm in a privileged position and like to strive for things that will help other people who aren't in such a privileged position.
What kind of medicine do you practice?
Veterinary medicine.
Oh, okay. Well, that's very, very cool. So are you working on livestock, or are you working on regular kind of pets and things like that?
Livestock now. Yep. I've done a range of stuff. So I've done research. I've worked for industry. I've done clinical practice, both small animal as well as kind of large animal, farm animal stuff, as well as government work.
I gotcha. Okay. Well, that's very cool. Okay. So can you tell us what country you're in now?
New Zealand.
Oh, I bet that's pretty there.
Oh, it's gorgeous. I absolutely love it. Yeah.
I was going to make a Hobbit joke, but I won't.
No, but I'm not too far from Hobbiton, so it's they still have kind of the site set up there, the scenery and stuff. You can go visit. It's kind of neat. A little bit more background with me is that I kind of got into the crypto space, I guess, back in maybe 2015, 2016. Discovered Bitcoin because I was trying to buy some cannabis on the black market or on the dark net, I guess. So, as you would say, illegal actions with Bitcoin. and then kind of thought, oh, this seems pretty cool. Started looking into it. Went through my Bitcoin seems cool phase, and then went through my 2017, 2018 came along. Block size wars. There was a lot of question about whether or not Bitcoin was going to survive and was going to morph into something else, Bitcoin Cash or whatever. As well as you had all of the IPOs and everything from the kind of Web3 crypto craze. I got into the IPO stuff and thought, oh, this stuff's pretty cool. I tried to find things. It was back then. It was a little bit different. The kind of the marketing and portrayal was a little bit more around use case than it is nowadays with just NFTs and meme coins. A lot of it was false use cases, but at least the idea around it was, I think, in a much better place than what it is now as far as crypto goes.
I gotcha.
But I had some projects I was quite excited about. There was one that was setting up a decentralized payment system and store for small scale growers. So people who, small scale farmers who are growing for the local community and stuff like that. There was Substratum, which was the decentralized internet. There was one called Power something, which was a startup that was supposed to be able to crowdsource funding for renewable development. It was an Australian startup. So obviously none of those things, panned out. And I very kind of quickly realized that centralized databases in pretty much every aspect are going to be superior to blockchain.
Right. But aside from blockchain, what you also had in all those projects was everybody fabricated their own proprietary token, right? That's kind of was the whole point.
Yes. Yep.
So
which was part of the illusion for me as being a positive, was that, it's one of those things that, you can actually get it in on the ground floor for a VC startup, whereas in the real world, you've got to be one of the connected people with lots of money and funding and approvals from government organizations to be able to actually invest in these things. Whereas with crypto, the idea was that the little guy can actually get in on the ground floor, but obviously that didn't work out for very many people.
It's one of those scenarios where it sounds great in theory, no regulation, let people release their own shares, which are whether they're tokens or whether they're stocks or whatever. But there's a reason why regulation exists, because we see what happens in the unregulated market with all these ICOs. The initial sale is when everybody else is cashing out.
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess you've learned that a lot of it is not what it was supposed to be, and eventually you just migrated towards Bitcoin and abandoned all the other schemes.
Yeah, well, I was at the time when I was kind of into the crypto stuff. I started, I was kind of against Bitcoin because of its energy use. And I'm on record in maybe like 2017, something like that, saying that if we don't replace Bitcoin with something that's proof of stake, then we will have failed the environment. And so I started researching more and more to be able to more effectively argue against proof of work and Bitcoin. And the more I started researching and the deeper I got, the more I started saying, hey, well, actually, hang on a second. This isn't quite, the situation that I thought it was when I started, and dug deeper and deeper and deeper. And then, started looking into, one of the things that I really love about Bitcoin is I'm a researcher. I like digging into things, and in most cases, I find something that I think is going to be some kind of revolutionary thing, and I start digging, and maybe spend quite a lot of time digging and thinking that it's pretty good. But eventually, you kind of hit a point, and you say, actually, this doesn't work.
I know that feeling. That happened with me with crypto.
Yeah. So there's two things that I found that hasn't happened with. One is permaculture, which I'm a big fan of permaculture and regenerative agriculture and all that kind of stuff. And two is Bitcoin. So as I dug deeper and started looking at kind of energy generation and grid, how grids operate, how we need to start addressing greenhouse gases, all that kind of stuff, I started actually seeing that I think Bitcoin could be a key tool in helping us with our energy transition.
Well, let's talk about what you just said there. Bitcoin and permaculture you considered as two, I guess, technologies, right, that you feel have a positive potential for humanity? Would you say that's an accurate characterization?
Technologies, or maybe call them systems, I guess, would be a
Okay.
little bit closer.
So let's apply my ultimate crypto question to both of those things, right? You familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay, so the ultimate crypto question is very simple. Name one specific thing that this new technology does that is better than existing technology. I feel we can, that could be answered for permaculture. You could probably answer that for permaculture, right? What does permaculture offer that is clearly better than what we've been doing before?
Well, that's where it starts getting difficult, right? Permaculture will lead to healthy soil, and healthy soil will lead to a healthy world, healthy people, healthy world,
Well,
all that kind of stuff.
Now I'm no expert in permaculture, but I would say permaculture is a way of engaging in agricultural pursuits that regenerate the resources that they use. They don't consume things. They're self-sustaining, right? Would you say that's a good description?
Pretty much, yeah. It's a design system that basically mimics the natural environment. So
Right.
we figure out ways that we can kind of alter the environment a little bit, but the environment still takes care of itself. We
Right.
don't have to be spraying it with all kinds of fertilizers and stuff like that.
So I'm trying to do the explain like I'm five thing with this to make it very simple, because I like to make these things pretty obvious. So what's the deal with permaculture? Well, regular agriculture, again, I'm not an expert. I'm just going to give you my amateur opinion. Regular agriculture, you're using things like fertilizers and pesticides and things like that have to be introduced into an environment that can create collateral damage. They also are resources that are acquired from other places that might not be replenishable very easily, right? That process of agriculture where you're using pesticides and fertilizer and all of that is not self-sustaining. So it will run out eventually. It can get to a point where you can't do it anymore. Whereas permaculture is the concept of rotating crops and planting things next to each other in such a way that you do not need to use pesticides or fertilizers. You kind of do it in such a way that the soils are naturally regenerating by the rotation of crops, right?
Yes, yeah. There's a whole world going on under the ground of different types of microbiology, and those things basically all kind of interact with each other to run the system. And when we're doing more the traditional style, those microorganisms don't exist because we have not created the natural environment for them to exist in. We just kind of plow a big field and plant a couple seeds in.
So it's basically renewable agriculture, right? Where you can grow things, but you're not creating any waste that can't be turned back into it. Whereas traditional agriculture creates waste and other stuff like that. So that's clearly a better way. If all agriculture could be permaculture, we would definitely be in a better place. I think nobody would argue against that, right?
There are plenty of people who argue against that, but that's my agreement, yes. But there are a lot of people who say that the current system works and that we can't move away from it. And if we do move away from the current system, people will starve. That's kind of the main talking point. But a lot of that comes from the installed agrochemical industry, basically, right? I mean, other than the financial industry, the agrochemical industry is probably the most powerful and largest in the world, and they do not want people to go to a zero input system because then they lose all of their income.
So,
yes.
But I guess it's also that argument kind of pivots a little bit to whether or not by better do you mean able to produce, there's multiple levels of what does better mean, right? Does better mean better for the environment, or does better mean able to produce the most dense amount of output?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And so different people have different definitions of what they think is good and what they strive to produce, basically. So I don't think there's necessarily a right answer. My opinion is that we would be better off if the entire planet moved to permaculture. But that is one of the downfalls of that is that it's not a system that you can just write down some directions. Step 1, plow field. Step 2, plant seeds. Step 3, spray at 1 month with this. Step 4, spray at 2 months with this. You can't do that. It's a system that you have to tailor to every specific environment. So I have no no expectation that the entire world is going to switch to permaculture overnight. That's something that's going to take many, many generations to do if
Right.
that ever happens. Just
But it's certainly a noble
pursuit,
pursuit, right? It's certainly a noble pursuit that we would want to try to make our agriculture a lower impact on the environment, more renewable, so that we don't have dependencies on outside foreign things like a lot of fertilizer is hard to source, and there's some argument over how much nitrogen and nitrates we can actually will have in forever, and so it's a no-brainer, right? Now could permaculture feed the world or not? That might be a separate argument, right? But there's no ambiguity there that it is definitely an improvement. Whether or not it's practical for everybody remains to be seen. So let's apply that same question to Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin better at than existing technology?
Okay, I would say that Bitcoin is the best, the most accessible way to transfer value cross borders for people without identification.
Okay. That's a very common talking point about remittances.
Is it? You have identification in there? People without identification?
I just have it that it allows you to send money across anywhere around the world quickly, and it's also addressed in my documentary too. It's one of the points later on in my documentary. I don't know have you seen the documentary Blockchain Innovation or Illusion?
I have.
Okay.
I have, yes.
So that's one of the sections towards the end. The first half is me talking about how everything works, and then the second half is me taking some common talking points. So the problem with that argument of yours is that, first off, it's just not specific, right? It's vague and ambiguous. The ability to transfer value without identification, I don't know if that really matters that much. Somebody's got a password. That password is their identification, right? If you don't have the key, then you can't identify yourself as a wallet holder.
No, by identification, I mean no government issued identification.
So it's a way of bypassing central authorities.
Well, it's a way for people who don't have a way of using a central authority to still transfer value cross border.
Well,
because people without identification don't have a way of using some central authority to transfer value cross border.
I mean, people transfer value all the time. You can transfer value using gift cards. You can transfer value using PayPal or M-Pesa.
PayPal requires identification. M-Pesa requires identification.
So you're talking about KYC. You're talking about wanting to anonymously send value from point A to point B.
Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, I just want people to be able to send value cross-border, even if they are a marginalized community that doesn't have an identification.
But what's the purpose of using identification? What's the downside of that?
The downside of using it, did you say?
Yeah. I mean, let's face it. You probably can't connect to the internet without identification. For most people, you have to have an account with a internet company, and they're not going to give it to you anonymously. I mean, I know there may be some possible places you could do that, but generally speaking, you can't get a phone without identification.
Well, that depends on the country you're in. I mean, many countries you can still buy burner phones, and that's how most people do it. They don't have accounts linked to their identification. You just buy a phone and you buy minutes to go up with that number.
Right. There are obviously
so that doesn't require identification, depending on what country you're in. If you're in some place like the U.S. or here in New Zealand, recently we could have burner phones, but I think they've now done away with that. You have to have an account now if you have a phone number. You have to have an ID attached to it, but that's relatively new as far as that goes.
So it sounds to be like your example is potentially criminal in nature, because you want to be able to do something anonymously, and there's reasons why ID is required, for money laundering, sanctions evasion, tax evasion purposes. There's laws in effect that put those requirements in place. So your example is that you feel like you should be able to bypass those laws.
I feel that either everybody should be able to comply with those laws, or you should be able to bypass those laws. But the issue is that when it comes to identification, it's not a question of whether or not people want to follow the law or not. Maybe they want to follow the law. Maybe they want to AML KYC, but because they don't have identification, they are not. They can't do that, because identification is required and they don't have it.
One of my pet peeves is people that seem very concerned about certain third world classes of people that are not third world classes of people. It's a very common occurrence in our community. Somebody will come in and they will talk about people in Africa or people in Brazil needing all this stuff. And then 10 minutes later, somebody from Brazil or Africa will reply to them going, "What are you talking about? I'm fine. I don't need these, I don't need that stuff." So I'm not convinced by that. I understand that you might be looking out for them, but that's a common trope that we run into is, well, you're a very well taken care of, well positioned social person, and you're concerned about somebody who doesn't have an ID. I'm just not convinced by that. Now you can try to convince me, but you understand what I'm saying.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe I've come across as a person who doesn't actually care about people, but I don't know how I can convince you.
No, I'm not saying that.
Care about
but I just find it funny that your average crypto bro who lives with their parents in Boca Raton, when asked for a use case for crypto, they will say banking the unbanked. They're not the unbanked. I bet they don't wake up in the morning going, "I wonder what's going on with my buddies over in Nigeria or Somalia." I don't think they care. I think the only time you ever hear that argument is when they're pushed into a corner, and that's the only thing that comes into their mind is, "Oh, these poor people." I hear that argument a lot. What about the people that are trying to take their wealth out of China, or they're in some kind of oppressive regime and they can use crypto to get out and move their wealth out? That's such a atypical exception. I just almost think it shouldn't be used. It's fine if you want to use it if you are in that situation. Like if you don't have an ID and this is the only way that you can do that, then talk me through that situation that you are in and make me understand why and how it's only one. But if you're not that guy, it's hard to make a convincing argument that since you are not that demographic, but you're suggesting this is the best option for people in that demographic, I think we need to hear from those specific people. If they tell me, "Hey, here's where I live, and this is the only thing option," I think that's a convincing argument, right?
Okay, well, we have people that do that. So you have people like Marin Estefanos, internationally award-winning humanitarian, who has negotiated over 30,000 hostage refugees who are kept as hostages over the course of, I think, the last 15 years or so. 30,000 hostage negotiations that she has worked through with payments, and she has come to the conclusion she now teaches refugees how to use Bitcoin because she has found that in many cases that is the only option for them to use
to pay their ransom get their friends and family away from criminals. You mean?
Well, as one of the uses, yes, but also just to be able to have something that they can travel with from country to country. If
she comes on the show, this would be a good subject to talk about. I want you to talk about what you know.
I doubt she's going to come on the show. Yeah. So I mean, I think I do know some stuff about issues associated with people in the third world.
Well, can you give me a?
Do I know personally? No, I certainly don't know personally. But you can look at what like the IMF says. Or the World Bank. So the World Bank just came out, I think it was last year, with a report. So there are 850 million people in the world that do not have any form of government identification. That includes any form of driver's license, passport, or birth certificate. And that those people report that they have difficulties in everyday life, particularly when it comes to interacting with the financial system. Right. So that's 850 million people. That's 1 out of 10 people in the world. So
yeah, but now stop.
Kind of say that. Why would I care about that?
Stop. Hold on.
Okay,
this figure that you've cited. Okay, so they don't have an ID. But
Correct.
do they have I would also love to see the same demographics of how many of them have electricity, how many of them have a phone, how many of them have access to the internet, how many of them can even have a vehicle or anything. You know what I mean? There's a lot of very, very, very poor people. There's a lot of, quote, unbanked is what the term typically is for these people.
Mm-hmm.
These are the unbanked. I guess maybe this is a new term, people without IDs, but last month it was being called the unbanked. The people that can't get a bank account, can't move money around. Crypto's supposed to be good for them.
In many cases, those are people who don't have identification, but
right, of course.
There's also additional things associated with that as well.
So the most distinctive characteristic of these people, based on my research, isn't that they don't have an ID or they don't have a bank account. It's that they are poor. They're very, very poor. They live in impoverished areas. Many of them live in oppressive governments and regimes, and those problems Bitcoin does nothing to fix. Absolutely nothing. If you're using crypto to get the hell out of that country somewhere else, I can see that being an option. But short of that, it doesn't necessarily it doesn't elevate any of these people's human situation. It's very context specific, right? I don't know if the same solution for somebody in El Salvador or Venezuela would be somebody in Somalia, I just don't think I can presume to say one solution would fit all these people and lift them out of their predicament.
I agree. There is no one solution that'll fix everything. Certainly, Bitcoin isn't going to fix everything, and Bitcoin isn't a solution to
anything.
At least in the short term, isn't a solution to government oppression and that kind of stuff. What it does is it does provide an option for people, like you said, if they need to get out of that government, if they need to transfer some funds to a friend overseas, but they are part of a resistance group, if they don't have identification, any reason whatsoever that Bitcoin is there. Is it the best option in any case? There are very few cases, if any, where Bitcoin is the best option, depending on the person. But it is an option.
Well, again,
so
that's fine.
I would kind of flip. So if I could.
But that's backpedaling. That's backpedaling.
This question back.
That's not answering the question. The question is, is it better? Because if it's just an alternative.
If I can just ask a quick.
Okay.
So just to flip this back on you, what does a Swiss Army knife do better than anything else?
It has a very dense combination of tools in a small package. It may not be the best.
So you can do a lot of different things, but
it may not be the best knife. It may not be the best screwdriver. It may not be the best pair of pliers or the pair of scissors. But if you have a very small space and you need a maximum amount of versatility in tools, that's what that thing is uniquely good for. See how you can answer these questions can be answered very quickly for truly innovative, disrupting products. That doesn't mean they're right for everybody, but at least there is some kind of general scenario where there really is nothing better. And I have not seen a general scenario.
850 million people in the world who don't have access to
an ID,
to any type of cross-border payment. Because they don't have an ID.
But I would argue
the best tool for them to use.
I would argue that the vast majority of this demographic you're citing also doesn't have access to the internet, and also doesn't have access to money in general that they could send anywhere.
Well, I would disagree with the access to the internet thing. I mean, I think more people in the world have access to the internet than they do with electricity because of mobile data, basically, versus an internet connection.
Right. Well, I would also argue that the vast majority of the people in that demographic don't have phones, and they don't have smartphones. M-Pesa and mobile money you don't even need a smartphone. You can use the SMS service to transfer money using these technologies. And crypto.
Well, you can do that with Bitcoin and Machankura as well.
Not really, not practically.
Of course.
Good luck punching in a private key on a 10-digit keypad. I mean, that's going to be fun.
Oh, it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. But it is an option. That's my point.
Yeah.
I think that it's important that people have an option when they have no other options available.
Agreed. If you want to mow your lawn and all you have is a pair of scissors, that is an option. But is it a realistic, practical option for people? No, not really. Are there better?
If I've got no money to buy a lawnmower, then it's going to work for me, isn't it?
Maybe it might work for you. Yes.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's not perfect. It's not going to. I mean, Bitcoin isn't going to create some kind of a utopia, at least in the short term. I mean, there are people who will say that it could alter things as generations go on, incentives, blah 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 blah, could make things better. But ultimately, I just see it as a tool, and whether or not it's useful to everybody, it is. I mean, I don't use it on a day-to-day basis by any means, and I have no plans to. So it's not something that is going to take over as the currency that everybody uses.
Okay, so
but I think that it will be there as an option for people that need it or want it.
right. Okay. Well, it goes without saying that you guys all believe it's going to be the future. I'm just trying to find out how it gets to that point, because in order for it to ever really become what most crypto people envision it to be, it has to be accepted by a humongous percentage of the population. Since we're talking about a way to transfer value that's supposed to be relatively consistent and reliable all around the world, that requires a certain critical mass of people to adopt this and to agree that it's useful. I don't think if that just services people without IDs, that's going to be, even if this fantasy scenario of that being the best option for just those people, I don't see that creating the demand that would make this thing where it's supposed to be in order to be, quote, successful. So for the rest of us, how do we use it in our day-to-day operation in any way that's superior to what we already have been using? We see stories every day about people who accidentally send their crypto to the wrong address using the wrong chain or this or that, and it's gone, or they click on the wrong thing and everything is gone. There's no consumer protections in this technology. And that's by design. I don't see that being something people want to regress back to.
No, I mean, people like you, how are you going to use it? I don't think you will. I think the U.S. dollar is not going anywhere. And if you don't want to use it for whatever reason, then you don't need to use it, right? So as far as kind of mass adoption, as far as currency goes, if that's what you're talking about, using it on a day-to-day basis, I think that we will see things evolve. We will see second and third layers. We'll see custodial options. I mean, we're already seeing, people like Visa, who you can get Visa crypto cards. I think that Bitcoin ultimately will be treated similar by payment processors. It will be just treated as
okay.
Let's
address that reference, the crypto Visa cards. That's another one of my crypto talking points. Endorsements. That might be actually number 8. Endorsements. I would argue Visa is not banking on crypto. Visa is just a network. They will license their network to anybody that will pay them money that doesn't do something that will create too much liability for them. In the case of companies like PayPal, Crypto.com, BitPay, these are all companies that offer a, quote, crypto Visa card, right? But what it really is it's a third-party exchange that is an intermediary between the Visa network and the customer. So you're not really buying anything in crypto natively. It's still being converted to fiat before it gets to the end result. So what you've basically done there is you've just added one or two extra middlemen into the transaction that are going to take even more value out of the transaction as spread exchange fees and transaction fees, in addition to the Visa network fees. So using crypto and integrating it into the traditional payment network makes everything more expensive, slower, more fault tolerant. There's additional restrictions that these exchanges will put in play, like whether or not you can use the card for gambling or this or that. It's more fault intolerant than the existing Visa network. So I wouldn't consider that an improvement.
An improvement on
or even an alternative
point is
solution.
My point is that type of stuff will make it easier to use on a day-to-day basis. It's not necessarily an improvement on
I agree. It would make
specific.
it easier to use because it's basically interfacing crypto, which is supposed to bypass central authorities, with central authorities. So the closer you get to peering with central authorities, the closer you look like standard money, it becomes more convenient because standard money is an evolution of what's become most convenient and what most consumers want. So sure, as the more crypto starts to look like Visa, Yeah, it'll get better, but we already have Visa, and so you can't ultimately even become competitive with Visa unless you become Visa, at which point we don't need blockchain, we don't need crypto.
Well, we'll see. I disagree a little bit there. So talking about Visa, so Visa already, that's what Visa does is they connect different exchanges, whether
Yes.
it's Forex exchanges for traditional foreign currencies, or whether it's crypto exchanges for crypto stuff. So if the system continues to develop, basically those Forex exchanges are the same thing as the crypto exchanges, right? And so Visa is doing the exact same thing.
Well, Visa has relationships mostly with banking partners, right? And the reason why Visa is successful... Well,
banking and exchanges.
Right,
yes.
Banking and exchanges, but it's the banking partners that really are the custodians of all the value, and Visa is the network that basically manages the transaction ledger and all of that. But it's the regulations and all of that which make that whole network stable and reliable and secure. And crypto is kind of in that regulatory gray area right now, which is one of the reasons why crypto has trouble finding banking partners. So there has to be this convoluted path between crypto exchange and the traditional monetary system. I'm not seeing that necessarily get better. We've definitely seen some movements, but I'm not convinced that this means crypto is mainstream. Just because we have ETFs now, I don't identify that as...
Crypto certainly isn't mainstream.
But I don't identify that as the traditional finance market is accepting crypto as one of them. I look at it more as like, oh, well, there's some money to be made charging people transaction fees if they want to trade in this weird security. So we might, if we could do it legally,
if there's money to be made, what are corporations going to do?
Right. But the thing,
they're going to adopt it, right? They're going to try to make money.
So corporations,
what, good or bad, they're going to try to make money,
and that's their mandate. So corporations, you could argue they're inherently
legally
evil.
Obligated to.
Right. They don't have a mandate to be moral or ethical. They have a mandate to create value for their shareholders. That's what they do, and that's why they need to be controlled. Because if they could do something immoral but it was profitable, they certainly would. And that's where I find crypto is kind of trying to exist in that gray area where it can kind of do whatever it wants without having to answer to anybody. But we know from experience that entities that are in that gray area end up kind of screwing people over. And you can take a look at all the failed crypto companies and projects, and that's basically what it is. So I'm trying to figure out how it's...
One of the reasons that I'm Bitcoin only now.
But Bitcoin is wrapped up in everything. It's part of it all. From the moment Bitcoin became popular, it was entangled with criminal activity. Now, maybe in our modern sensibilities, we think weed should never be criminalized, and I agree. It's just a plant. It shouldn't be illegal to grow it. It should be freely available. But there are laws, and we have to follow them, and we can change those laws. That's what we do. We lobby to change the laws that we think are unjust. But there's also, there was a lot of stuff going on Mt. Gox that certainly was really bad. Hiring hitmen, stealing people's personal information, really dangerous synthetic drugs and stuff like that. And, that's surely you can argue not all of that should be legal.
No, for sure. Yeah, I believe in laws.
The closest I find to use cases for crypto tend to be those illegal areas, though. And even your example,
for sure,
with some
Bitcoin can be used for illegal activities. Absolutely, it doesn't mean that it's legalizing anything, right? Those laws are still in
but
place.
I'm saying that
and it doesn't mean that if Bitcoin didn't exist, that those things would stop.
No, but I do think that unlike the traditional finance systems, fiat, credit cards, Bitcoin is almost purpose-built for criminal activity. There's been some studies out that, people say, well, more dollars are used in crime than Bitcoin, and that is true on a volume level, but not on a per capita level, not in terms of percentage of transactions. When you look at the percentage of activity on the network, Bitcoin and crypto has much more criminal activity.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people run numbers both ways. I've seen people run numbers that say that it is used a lot more, and people that run numbers that say that it isn't. And it kind of depends on what numbers you're looking at. So, like I don't think that pointing out that Bitcoin can be used for illegal activities is a reason that it should not be used at all. I mean, the
No.
IMF, what was it? They just came out with their report last year. It's $3 trillion in illicit funds that went through the traditional system. They did a report 2 years ago looking at AML KYC and found that 99.8% of illicit funds make it through AML KYC. They only catch 0.2% of them. So,
Right.
Can Bitcoin be used for illegal stuff? Yes. If Bitcoin doesn't exist, are those illegal things going to stop happening? No.
No, and
But
I agree with
it
you
will
there.
then remove an option that a lot of people, that not a lot of people, that at least some people have as their only real option for payment.
Right, but see, it's not about whether it can. It's about whether or not the most valid use case for something is not good. That's not a good sign. Like, sure, there's tons of fiat cash that's used in crime, but if you get rid of cash, you also cause a tremendous amount of other damage to legitimate areas of society. Same thing with banking. Crypto says, you could be your own bank. Well, if all the banks were gone and we only had Bitcoin, there'd be a whole bunch of services that are useful for economic growth that would not be available anymore. Banks do a lot more than just allow people to send payments from point A to point B. If Bitcoin disappeared tomorrow, there would be no collateral damage in traditional society. I don't even think anybody would really notice. It would be news among a small subset of people that had invested in that, but it's not going to affect commerce. It's not going to affect wages. It's not going to affect jobs. It's not going to affect the unemployment rate. Even though there's a tremendous amount of crypto money influencing politics, I don't think crypto is attached in any sensitive way to traditional society. So given how much energy it wastes and its propensity to be used in a lot of criminal cases, plus the fact that it doesn't seem to provide any net benefit to mankind that's really measurable in any meaningful way, unlike everything you would compare it to, I think that's the issue.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I understand your viewpoint there, and I just think that having an option for the world's most downtrodden people is an important option to have, and the fact that it doesn't interact or interface with traditional society, that doesn't bother me all that much.
Okay. All right.
Those aren't the people that I think need it.
I know. Okay.
Energy.
Let's put it.
Energy.
Let's cap that argument off. And I just want to say, I appreciate your concern for the unbanked. I would be more apt to take it as a legitimate argument if you were actually unbanked and you could give me firsthand experience of how specifically it helps you. But you're just concerned about this nebulous group of people here, which I'd let them speak for themselves. And I think if somebody on it didn't have an ID, after a few minutes of talking with them, we'd find out they have a lot of other problems, and sending value is probably the least of their worries.
Maybe, but it's still a worry, right? It still takes up
maybe,
time.
Maybe not.
I saw a report as well from the IMF that in countries where people have a devaluing currency, so where their currency is not stable, that they spend 20% of their waking time going to and figuring out how to transfer money into whatever different currency they can. So there'll be kind of maybe 4 or 5 different currencies that the local guy on the corner has access to, and so they have to figure out which one they can buy to hold until the next week.
I would argue the vast majority of people that fit that demographic aren't worried about money at all. I would argue instead they're bartering. This is a time-honored way that people can transfer value and debt amongst themselves, is by bartering.
Unfortunately, if we get to a point where we're bartering, then we failed already. Well, that is not a way for society to succeed.
It happens everywhere. It happens all the time. We're always bartering. We're always trading goods and services. It'll never go away because it's just a super useful thing. And people that are in impoverished nations, that's what they do. The guy who can repair somebody's car will repair somebody's car in return for some food from a grocery store guy. They don't need to even convert that into money. And I say that happens a lot more often, and it's a lot more convenient for people in those situations than them running around trying to figure out which tokens or monetary system they need and convert that. Because every time you do that, right, every time you transfer some value into whatever monetary system that you feel is the best one for you, you're going to lose some of that value because they're not going to do it for free, right? So we're talking about a class of people already that have very limited resources. So to subject them to additional fees and exchange spread charges just seems even more predatory. That at least to me.
Yeah, and see, I could kind of then flip the point on you, right? That I would take your point that these people are bartering more seriously if you were one of these people.
Well, I barter all the time.
Time you bartered
today. I bartered today.
Well, when was the last time you had to barter because you didn't have access to money? You said, "Okay, I've got this cow. I want some wheat for it." That's not really. It's not a good way for society to function. There's a reason we have money, and we have a representation of value.
I barter.
It doesn't always
all the
work.
time.
Money doesn't
all
always
the
work.
time.
Bitcoin doesn't always
Doing
work.
somebody a favor, and taking somebody to lunch, and in return they do something for you. That's bartering. You got a friend who's a lawyer,
for sure,
and he makes a phone call for you, and you take him out to lunch. You just bartered. I mean, everybody does that all the time. They don't need to use an additional monetary system, and that'll never go away. I think it's just super useful, and I think that's one of those things. It doesn't matter what class you're in, doesn't matter what social level you are. There, you can transact with anybody on those levels if you have something of value. Now, if you don't have anything of value, that's another problem. And I think there's a lot of people that are in that demographic you cite that are just they don't have opportunity. That's what they need more than anything else. Maybe they want to work. Maybe there's no jobs. Crypto doesn't fix that. So again, I find it's not a solution to any of the real problems that these people might face. But again, until we get somebody on and talk about it, I don't think that addresses the question. I don't think it's specific enough, and I also think it's all hearsay, about what these people need and what's the best option is for them. So, what else you got? Yes, what else do you got? Well, at this point in our casual conversation / debate, we were at like the 50-something minute mark, and we pivoted off into another discussion about Bitcoin and whether or not it's good for helping address energy issues. And that went on for at least another 45 minutes, and I thought, maybe I should break this into 2 separate podcasts. I also want to gather a little bit more peripheral information about the Bitcoin energy topic. So for our next episode, we'll continue this discussion with Dr. Rob, but I'm going to dig up a little bit more information, and we'll post the second half of the interview later, where we talk about, does Bitcoin solve the energy problem? Is it actually helpful in addressing that situation? So you heard this, to me, was another variation of helping bank the unbanked. In this case, they were referred to as people without IDs instead of just unbanked poor people. Again, I really don't see the legitimacy in somebody in the first world talking about this as a solution for people in the third world. The people that I've talked to in the third world don't tend to agree, and you'd think they would be a little bit more credible. So I find that argument kind of weak, but you let me know. What do you think? And we'll continue this another time. Well, there you go. Another episode done. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and supporting our channel and everything. If you'd like to find out more about us, our main website is ioRadio.org. You can also catch us on YouTube at YouTube/American Scream Video. That's where you'll find these podcasts with additional AV added, as well as the documentary Blockchain Innovation or Illusion, which I recommend everybody watch. We're available on all the major podcast streaming platforms, so be sure to look for ioRadio. And until next time, I want to personally thank everybody for tuning in and your support.